Let me begin. We're talking about marriage here, and we're going to go for about 30 minutes and have communion here in just a little bit. But let me begin with what this message is about. Here's a fellow that goes to a particular city. He's never been there before. Goes down by a river. Never been by this river before, and there's a cafe there by the river in this city. And he sits there for a little while, and all of a sudden a crocodile comes up out of the water, out of the river, and grabs the guy that's in the cafe and drags him down into the water. And this guy jumps up and he says, "Whoa!" He said, "There's a crocodile," and everybody's just looking. Nobody's doing anything. Well, he runs over there and grabs this guy and pulls him back, and the guy loses a big old chunk of his leg to this crocodile. And he turns to everybody there. He said, "Did y'all see that?" Nobody responds. "Didn't you see that?" They said, "You don't understand. In our culture, it's embarrassing to talk about crocodiles." And he starts looking around, and sure enough, most of the people there are missing arms and legs. And a bunch of them missing big old chunks out of their body, and finds out that most everybody there has lost a loved one through these crocodiles. But in that culture, it's just considered rude to talk about crocodiles. We're going to talk about sex this morning. Crocodiles. Not a one of us here that doesn't have some loved one that's lost part of themselves through sex, a misapplied sexuality. Many of you here have been hurt deeply by an errant perspective of sexuality. We better deal with it. We don't talk about that in Christian culture. And so the crocodiles just keep coming out of the river and keep chewing people up, and no one in the church will talk about it. We'll let them learn the way we did from the playground and the Texaco bathrooms, you know. We'll just learn it on the street as if this is some minor little area that nobody cares about and is of no ultimate repercussions in your life. Well, I'll assure you, you may not talk about it before you go into marriage, but it's about to become a big, red, screaming neon sign once you get into it. Now, Howard Stearns will talk about it. Madonna will talk about it. And she'll talk about it well and often. Errant, but often. So we're going to talk about it. Now, I'm going to pray here in just a second. If you came here with a little guy this morning, I'm going to give you a chance to sneak out, all right? I probably should have warned you about this last week. But this may not be something, I'm not going to be talking about body parts or anything, all right? I'm not going to be graphic, but I'm going to be frank with you about certain ideas. And so if you don't want your little one to hear, you sneak on out, or you may be 30, 40 years old. You may need to sneak on out right here. And I'll announce you, all right, when I see you. So pray with me here. Father in heaven, in these 25, 30 minutes, we're going to take time and investigate some things, and a lot of us are hurting on them, and we can't talk about it to anybody, and what's sad, we can't even talk about it to our mates. And so I pray that you would give us a little level playing ground and a vocabulary to work with. Do a good work, we'll ask in these minutes. For Jesus' sake, amen. This morning I'm going to give you 5 things. On the 5th one, I'm going to give you 7 things. You just stay with me and go out to lunch afterwards and have a little visit on these. Just go down the list. It'll be for some interesting conversation overheard at Good Eats and the like, all right? You know, if you take your sex notes, you can get 20% off at Good Eats. Number one, sexuality is a divine thing. Adam is told to multiply and fill the earth. To multiply, you reproduce. To reproduce, you have sex. We have a number of physical aspects to our body that are physically and wonderfully made, and sexuality is one of them. Just like your cardiovascular, just like the magnificence of a brain, heart, lungs, skeletal system, muscles, sexuality is an ordained thing by God. In sexuality, a guy once compared it to this. He said it's like a pilot that has this F-16 and it's so big and so massive, but he can, with fingertip control on that computer, on that dash, he can just guide that thing. And he said that's kind of the way that sexuality is in a marriage, that there are volumes about the both men and women that is unspoken. But in sexuality, you don't have to be a poet or a songwriter, that you just through fingertip control are given a system that becomes incredibly sensitized. That when in the midst of sex, everything else in your life shuts down. You don't even know it's there. You focus on that mate. Well, that's ordained by God. That's not an accident. That's not a biological phenomena within nature. That's ordained. All animals copulate. Humans make love. And that's ordained by God. It's a good thing. Or it's a divine thing. Secondly, it's a good thing. You know, until the 4th century AD, it was taught that the original sin was sex. That it was an evil thing. I had a couple that I counseled years ago, had a number of kids. Came to me with, the guy said, we just got big sexual problems. And I said, well, tell me about it. He said, my wife's just got a problem, been raised from the time she was little that sex was in itself an evil thing. He said, we have a number of kids. My wife has never seen me and I've never seen her naked. And I said, well, how did you do that? He said, well, we would just undress, get in the bed, I'd get in the bathroom, turn off the light, feel our way, do the unclean act, confess it, and have children. Now, is that a healthy view of sex? You know where they learned that? Church. That's where they learned it. Matter of fact, down in Mexico, there is a particular place that on your honeymoon night, they put a sheet between the man and the woman so they won't touch. They cut a hole in the sheet so he can penetrate the woman, and they won't defile the honeymoon by the evil of sensuality. What do you think about that? That's the church teaching that sex is in and of itself evil. Solomon said, be exhilarated in the wife of your youth. Let her breast satisfy you at all times. It is a delight and an enjoyment. Dr. Ed Wheat years ago wrote one of the first books on sexuality for Christians. It was called Intended for Pleasure. That it's not just something to have kids. It recreates love and tenderness. Matter of fact, the Song of Solomon, I've taught 70 seminars on it. Every time I've taught it, it doubles. Every single time, it doubles. And the Song of Solomon, you watch that couple make love twice. And fellas, on your most racy of days, you'll never touch that guy for being exciting. Ladies, on your most exciting of days, the most passionate you ever are, you'll never approach that woman. And yet, we don't even study the book often. Or we'll allegorize it as the husband is Christ and the woman is the church, and we'll take it out of its literal meaning. There's just something within us that seems to feel that somehow sexuality is in and of itself an evil and a dirty thing. Listen, I remember one time teaching the Song of Solomon to the Theta Chi fraternity at North Texas, all right? Now, these are guys who just knew that sexuality began within their fraternity, okay? And God said, let there be sigma nu, and there was sex, all right? And that isn't the way it works. And I was teaching the Song of Solomon, and we handed out Bibles to these guys who didn't have Bibles. There was a guy in the front row, and I was to one of the steamier sections of the text. And he does just like this. Sexuality is the fireplace of your marriage. The fireplace is where there's heat and light and warmth and family. See, marriage is not just a guy that's a mechanic and a woman that takes care of kids and a homemaker. No, there is passion. That's what we were thinking when we went into it. There was passion. So it's a good thing. Thirdly, it's an exclusive thing. It's between a husband and a wife, and that is why not one single time in the Bible does God sanction His pleasure on sexuality outside of marriage, whether as singles or in the area of adultery. Never. It's always a man shall leave his father and mother and cleave to his wife. How many times in the Bible, in the New Testament alone, do you see a condemnation of premarital or extramarital sex? Romans 13, 1 Corinthians 5, 1 Corinthians 6, Galatians 5, Ephesians 5, Colossians 3, 1 Thess 4, 1 Peter 4, Hebrews 13, 2 Peter 2, 1 John 2, Jude, and Revelation. There's 13 times Jesus said, out of the heart proceed the evils of man, and he lists them and says, immoralities. And so make no doubt, if you want to deny the integrity of the Bible, that it's not true in what it says, feel free. But if you're going to consent to whether this is the Word of God, sexual purity is not a debatable issue among evangelicals. Did y'all know that? It's not a debatable issue with evangelicals that hold to the integrity of the Bible. It's a divine thing, good thing, exclusive thing. It's also, do you know, it's a responsible thing. Sexuality is not something that merely occurs in a marriage just because you're all excited. Sometimes there is a duty and a responsibility and an obligation that you have to your mate. The Apostle Paul said, because of immoralities, let each man have his own wife, and a wife her own husband. That it meets a valid need that if it isn't met can get you into trouble. Better to marry than to burn. Let the husband fulfill his duty to his wife, and the wife her duty to her husband. The husband doesn't have authority over his own body, but the wife does. Likewise, the wife doesn't have authority over her own body, but her husband does. Stop defrauding each other except by agreement for a season to devote yourself. Are you wondering why I've memorized all these verses? I didn't know that I had, but I had. Stop defrauding each other by agreement for a season, that you might devote yourselves to prayer, but come together soon, lest Satan tempt you for your lack of self-control. So it doesn't just mean that couples have sex just because they both happen to be in the mood. Sometimes it's an act of service among one that said, you have a need, then I'll meet that need. It's an act of love. As a matter of fact, there's a very famous book written on biblical sexuality that is called The Act of Love. Are you with me so far? But there's another aspect of sexuality, that it's a learned thing. It's a skill. Before we marry anybody at Denton Bible Church, you know what they kiddingly call us, don't you? Denton Bridal Church? Because we have so many weddings here. We won't do a wedding until we take a couple and counsel them. And one of the things we do in counsel is we take a young man off to the side and a young woman off to the side, and a guy and a girl spend time with them, and they tell them the facts about sexuality. And a lot of times those kids look at us and go, the heck you say? For real? Golly. And they may be double doctorates out there, but they don't know the facts about sexuality. It's a learned skill. Now, I'm going to give you 7 things you need to be aware of. And these are good points of discussion you might have with each other. Because I've discovered something, that simply because Christians have the understanding of what theologically sexuality is, doesn't mean that they can keep from being clumsy oafs that stumble around each other. And all too often we learn too little, too late. Incidentally, when you've got a sexual problem in marriage, Everything else that is a problem at a 3, sexuality, if it's at a 3, feels like a 7. It's painful to have a sexual problem. And sadly enough, you can't put a table back there and say, if you're having a sexual problem this morning, we just sign up back there at the back. You can't do that. I mean, you got to wait till they come down and, catch you off to the side. This is a problem area. Matter of fact, in marriage, the biggest problems are communication, then sex, then finances, then in-laws. Okay? Let me give you 7 things to be wise about. Number 1, men and women differ. Now you say, wow. No, a lot of times Christians hadn't figured this out. Men and women are different sexually, and you have to be able to play the hand that you are dealt. Gary Smalley said it best when he said, men are microwaves, women are crock pots. Men sexually are microwaves. Ding! They're ready, all right? Where can a man be and want sex? Roofing? Hang gliding? That's the way men are. Men are sexual creatures. A woman is a microwave. A man's a microwave. A woman is a crock pot. A woman heats up slowly through the day. One guy said it like this. He said, for a man, sexuality is the intermission. For the woman, it's the main event. She builds up on it. And that's why, guys, for a woman to be a good lover, she has to build up steam, so to speak. And a man does that by being gentle and tender and kind. A woman's heart and a woman's body are real closely enmeshed. And if a man is not kind and loving and tender from 8 o'clock on through about 5, come 10:30, she can't separate that emotion from her body. And she can turn off. Now, a man can do this too, but a woman can really do it. And men have to learn this. In other words, and I didn't realize this till I got married, that sexuality is rigged. God kind of sucker punches men through sexuality. Once we get into it, see, women don't have male sex drives, and that's what we all think that they do. And because if women had men's sex drives, marriage would just be these 2 little Tasmanian devils. They're just going at it. See? And it would be great, but we'd just now be inventing like buttons, wheels. So, they're not like us. God will not let my wife simply be the person that satisfies my passion. He's not going to, otherwise marriage would just be this selfish enterprise that frankly most guys are thinking of when they get into it. That now I get all I want anytime I want, let's go. All right? And if men had women's sex drives, now marriage would be this tremendous conversation. And the world would be highly developed, but there'd be about 700-800 people, all right? That's all you'd have. And so when you get married, a woman's going to have to be a great lover. A woman sometimes, just to be quite honest, she's going to have to raise it up a notch, okay? A woman sometimes just going to have to go, all right, here we go. And a guy is going to have to, pull it on back a little bit and go, here, whoa, whoa, boy, whoa. Now slow down. Whoa, come here. Slow down. See? So a man's going to have to be tender and a woman has to be a servant. God's rigged it like that. Secondly, you have to understand, to a man and a woman, what is good sex. If you say good sex to a woman, great marital sex, she's thinking tenderness. As a matter of fact, a woman needs to be biologically pleased by a man. But that woman's thinking a lot deeper than that. They love to be held. There's an old bromide that say men use romance to get sex, women use sex to get romance. Because that's what they enjoy, is the before, the after, as much as the during. And that's why our mates, a lot of times, guys, get frustrated at us whenever we finish up and we just start snoring. All right? Because they're thinking of the aftermath of being held. Now, not always, but quite often, and I'd say usually, that's the way a woman is geared, to be loved. When you say that to a man, a great sexual experience is going to be responsiveness. It's a woman that doesn't give you the feeling that she's just having to endure it for the cause of heaven, you know. They used to take girls in England on your honeymoon night, lay there and think of England. Just endure it for the sake of the empire. And that's not what a man wants. It's a woman that is responsive, that is assertive, i.e. aggressive, that's creative, that makes him feel like he's desirable. That's what a man's thinking. And ladies, let me inform you right now of something that your husband's praying that I'll say right now. With men, during sex, every aspect of that man is in hyperspeed. Matter of fact, during sex, you can just pretty much get whatever you want off your husband. Give me all your money. All right, take it. Hurry up. A man, during sex, any way that you move, any changing of position of your hands or anything, it registers to a man. The fragrance that you have on, he picks up on that. What you wear to bed, he picks up on. Now, I know that a lot of women dress for comfort, right? And you have a gown that your mother gave you and her mother gave her, and you brought it over from Latvia, all right? Back in the old days. Well, that's all well and good. But a man is excited by what he feels, everything about the experience is exciting to a man. As a matter of fact, you know what the most exciting of all the senses is to a man? It's a fact. It's sound. It's whatever he hears. No man has ever said to his wife during sex, shh, quiet. Number 3, C here, all right. C is, number 3 under this, is start early. If you're going to make love at 10 o'clock, you start, guys, by taking out the trash. You don't take out that trash, and that woman remembers, like Moses, she remembers, okay? I'm a trash hauling fiend because I know how my wife is. If it's a cold day, don't you leave her car on empty. Okay. So you start early. You don't kill the mood by things that you do during the day. Ever so often, my wife and I are kind of sending signals, something might happen. And I'll say something that's a little bit on edge, and my wife will say, Tommy, don't be stupid. And that's why, fellas, if you want to build the moment, don't just, get ready to go to bed and go shower and get to bed and wait for her to clean up the kitchen and put the kids down. She remembers, okay. See, you're thinking like a man. You're thinking, I'll go in and be lying there couched in my glory, in my grandeur, in my Speedo brief, all right? That's frightening to her. You want to excite her? You say this: honey, you go take a shower, get to bed. Let me clean up the kitchen. Let me put the kids down. Okay? So start early in the day. Best way to have a great 10:30 is to be good from about 7:30 on that morning. Write this down. Learn your signals. I used to always wonder, when you got married, do you just come in at like 10 o'clock and go, sex, 30 minutes. Hey, eppa, be there. I mean, do you do that? Do you run up a flag or something when the husband comes home? You have signals. Like a man, a great signal common among men, is to shave at like 9:30 in the evening. I mean, with a big old noisy can of spray. I've got a couple of buddies of mine, and they started laughing when I taught this one time, because she would always go to bed in a red terry cloth robe that was, by common assent, about as exciting as a tarp. Okay? And they had a signal, because what he would do is when he would go to bed, he would say, good night, dear, good night. They would kiss, and then he would pat her on the hip. And he would always feel that terry cloth robe, except ever so often he'd go, hello. And she'd have on something a little bit, put your own word in right there. And that was a signal to him. Maybe it's a fragrance, maybe it's an aroma, but you learn each other as to how you are. Write this down. Beware of combinations. And I say this to men. You know what I mean by combinations? It's when a guy thinks he's learned to kind of pick his wife's lock, so to speak, that he's learned her. And he's thinking, because one night, he kisses here, caresses here, squeezes here, bingo, great sex. You know what a guy will do? He'll write it down. Put it on a post-it on the lampshade right there. See? He always knows where it is. A week later, something's happening. He says, wait a minute, dear. He takes it down. Okay. Tries it again. And she says, ow, what are you, sick? See, you can't learn your wife's combination. There are nights that I know my wife is being a faithful, dutiful evangelical. There's other nights that I think she's been drinking. Now, does my wife have to apply this? None whatsoever. All right? What does it take to arouse a man? Show up, pretty much. Just show up. Not always, but usually, all right? Men are the straight line, women are the wavy line. And that's why, guys, when you open that bedroom door some night, you just got to run to daylight. You're not real sure where she's going to be. You got to be quick. Write this down. You've got to learn boundaries. This is one of the biggest complaints you hear in sexuality. What do I mean by boundaries? Things that one of that couple feels that they do not like, do not enjoy, and have a problem with. Generally speaking, a man has wider boundaries than his wife. What are the things that a man will say to his wife? Dear, how could you? It just doesn't happen. But how often will a man take his wife someplace that she's not ready to go? Now, fellas, my boundaries are a lot farther than my wife's. Most, not all, but most men's are. If your wife communicates and says not tonight or no, or you know that she has a problem with some different aspects, and there's nothing in the document right here that's going to give you hard, fast rules. You've got to be sensitive to your mate. God won't let you get off that easy. You have to be loving, not just literate. You have to be sensitive. When your wife says no and you learn your wife, and you make her feel guilty, or you become resentful, you don't do just a little bit of damage to her psyche, and she will close like a flower on you. If your wife has a problem with some things, then you learn the woman that God gave you, and you delight her where you can. One woman said to me, "I fear sundown." Don't you do it. You be kind to her. And ladies, you might need to visit with another woman, because sometimes I have had women say that we have a problem with some deals, and I'll just be very open and said, "Let me help you, what deals?" And she tells me, and I say, "Whoa, wait a minute. You might need to rethink that. Some things can be problems. That's not one of them. So you might need to call up somebody and just visit with another woman, as a guy with another guy." And lastly, you need to talk and communicate. Learn each other. In my marriage, I know my wife. I tell you what we do. We pray together. Not before, but afterwards. Because a marriage is nourished by sexuality. I used to think that great couples were shown to be great couples by a great sexual relationship. I don't believe that quite as much. I think that great couples are great couples because they use sexuality and they're deliberate. And this man says, "I am going to be kind and loving and gentle, and during sexuality I'm going to delight my wife." And she says, "I'm going to excite and make this man feel like a man." And the afterglow is wonderful. And when my wife and I hold each other, there have been times that she said, "I like that. I like that." Did I have to say, "Whoa, let me write that down"? It was stuck right here forever. And I've said that to her. And we talk, and I know her. I've learned her. Learn your mate. Don't be so falsely prudish that you can't talk to your husband. And said, "That was great." And he'll say, "Really? He never knew that." And you tell her, "That was great. Sometimes I like, sometimes I don't. I always like that." Great. Learn your mate. Okay? Now, as we conclude here, that's all I got. It isn't that difficult. You may need to talk. You may need to take these notes and go down on the last points of that number 7 and say, "Fred, what do you think of that? Sally, what do you think of that? He was right there. Boy, he was really right there." That's no problem. When you talk, there's no more vulnerable place than when you talk about sexuality. We take it personal. If you talk about this, you talk nice. You talk nice. You say, "Sweetheart," because you're operating. You've got an open body right here. You've got exposed nerves. You work with an anesthetic. You be kind when you talk. And you be attentive. If your wife listens to this, and sometimes this week she tries to be a little more whatever, and you know that she was listening, don't you say to her, "Well, it's about time." You say, "Thank you, thank you, thank you. That's wonderful. Take all my money." And if that man starts making a concerted effort, ladies, don't you punish him. You go crawl up into his lap and put your arms around his neck and say, "That, dear, was an answered prayer. Thank you so much. I felt so delighted when you did that." Help each other out on this. Be nice. This is a painful area. Pray with me here. We'll enjoy communion. Father, all that we are in marriage is by what we understand of you. And I should be faithful to my wife and kind to my wife and gentle to my wife. I should love her even at times when she is not as loving and not as lovely. Because that's how you loved me. And that's how you love me. And that's how you'll keep me unto the end. And that is how a wife is to love her husband with all that she can. Because that's our standard. That's how you did. And so, as we close our time here, and holding in our hands bread that is an emblem of the bread of life of Him that was striped and pierced and broken for us, that we could be giving to each other. As we hold in our hand this juice, and we recognize His blood that was shed for us, that we would remember that one gave his life when we didn't care. And when two people start doing this in a home, what a delight it is with reciprocated love. And we'll ask this for Christ's sake. Amen.